Hello, everyone. This is Tom from Opening Pathways. I am certainly excited today because I have a great guest for you. I have Peter Moot from Promi today with me. Peter, it's great to have you here.
It's great to be here, Tom.
I'm really interested to know what inspired you to start your company.
Ooh, well, a lot of things, honestly, but the kind of short gist of it was having grown up, I was always very entrepreneurial. I knew at some point that I wanted to start my own company. Um, Promi takes kind of a lot of the stuff that I had been working on at Uber and kind of builds on that and makes it available to other merchants. And so when I was working on Uber on these types of products, I could really see the impact that these types of features had for a lot of merchants. And I thought it would be a great opportunity to just make them available, and just kind of give other people a lot of the um, latest and greatest tech that Uber has built in-house. I appreciated the journey and a little bit of just taking on my own risk and seeing kind of where it goes. So,
I see. What was the defining moment that started you on this path?
so I actually was probably one of the many people working in big tech companies right now that are facing kind of existential crises. And I ended up quitting my job at Uber and taking 6 months to kind of travel around the world. Um, and so between islands in Southeast Asia and going through the Middle East, I kind of was looking for what I thought would give me a little bit more fulfilling work life. And I landed on kind of starting my own thing. And so during that time, I actually applied to some accelerators, kind of found a co-founder, really started chipping away and nailing down what the idea was that we were going to pursue. And then at the end of the 6 months, I jumped right into Y Combinator to start up this company.
Traveling around the world really can open our eyes. I know it's done it for me I think we have an opportunity to let go, to really be present because you're forced to be able to get around and make sure you're safe and then to expand what we're thinking about. So it's good to hear you had that experience. Tell me a little bit about your background before Uber.
Yeah, so I studied economics and computer science at Harvard. That was a long time ago now. I graduated in 2014. From there, I did what probably most Harvard graduates do and went into consulting. Didn't do finance. That's kind of like the other big one that everyone does. And then I think I realized pretty quickly that consulting was not for me. It was just a little too buttoned up. The deliverables in that environment were very much just a stack of papers with ideas, and you'd kind of just tell someone, "Hey, go build this," and hopefully it works. And so I jumped over from there into a startup called Jet.com, which was an e-commerce startup, eventually acquired by Walmart. But it was kind of my first foray into a much smaller company and product management. And that was much more rewarding because it allowed me to kind of really see the impact of the things that I was working on, compared to consulting, where it's very much just like the strategy side of the business. Product management allows you to see kind of a little bit of the strategy, why you would want to build something, and then see the actual development and run experiments to see how successful it was towards the end. So I thought that was very rewarding. And then from there, I jumped over to Uber, which was great to get more of that kind of big tech company experience. But obviously, I appreciated kind of the smaller companies and decided to do something on my own. So back to the startup world it is.
Back to the startup, yes.
Mhm.
Um, what what experiences have you had that shaped your approach to leadership? I know my viewers are going to be interested in hearing this.
Um, yeah, it's a pretty good question because, even at this point, I think I'm really sharpening kind of my own skills as becoming a leader. Um, and I think there are like different levels of being a leader. Obviously, starting your own company is a whole different level of leadership than running a team at Uber or even like the simple things of working with engineers and running a project while I was at jet.com. Um, Something that I've kind of like worked on and kind of gravitated towards over time is a little bit of my own flavor of leadership. I think is very much like try to build a collaborative, open environment that is very transparent. I really like being someone who kind of reports can come to with ideas, and they don't have to fear that like, oh, that's not a good enough idea or things like that. That we can kind of whiteboard with someone. And a little bit of my philosophy there is, you want someone excited to come to work. They want to be intellectually curious. And I think that kind of goes with my hiring philosophy also of the types of people that you want to bring into an organization. So um, those I think are probably the big things to me that kind of stick out. I am a very hands-off leader as far as my reports go. I'm not trying to get into the weeds of how they're doing things, not trying to manage their hours. I much more kind of manage towards like deliverables and just want to understand what, um, the like the overall end will look like and like how they're thinking about the strategy of these things that they're building. Um, but I think that also relies on, high quality workers, people who want to come
Yes.
to work, who are very interested in what they do. And so it's a very different management strategy that I think would work best if you are working with people who maybe need a little bit more oversight and such. I've just had the good fortune of working with more people who are good, are curious, are smart. So yeah,
Yes, I think it comes back to being clear on who you're hiring
right,
and what process you go through to make that happen, and then respecting people for why you hired them.
right,
Um,
exactly.
yeah, I always like the idea of is the work getting done versus how did you get it done?
Right.
Was there ever a time on this journey that you doubted your vision?
Plenty of times, and we have pivoted actually. I think probably the majority of startups pivot at some point. Um, when we came in originally, I knew that I wanted to work in kind of the pricing domain, but having chatted with a lot of different merchants, understanding kind of what they cared about, we did kind of, I wouldn't even say too much of a like major pivot, but like plenty of minor pivots on the types of products that we were building. We ended up moving more and more towards kind of personalization and sending the right kind of discount to the right customer. Versus there were times when we were thinking maybe we can just automate the discount value that everyone sees and make it kind of dynamic so it'll change on a daily basis, but everyone would see the same one. Um, that actually we pursued that for a while, but it just didn't seem like there was as much demand for it, and so we moved away from that. And um, so I mean, even today we're constantly evaluating kind of how valuable what we're building is. But I think we have confidence now at the high level vision that like there will be a lot of value in this kind of personalization model that we're able to give to merchants. But even what that means as far as uh, how frequently do we update the discounts? Where are we integrating? Are they kind of real-time on-site discounts? Are we doing more of the email and SMS kind of focus? There are millions of decisions that we rethink daily, and need to kind of come up with at least a best hypothesis to pursue and test that to make sure that we're going in the right direction.
Iterations.
Yes. Yeah,
Yes.
definitely.
Yes. Keeps us fresh, I think, too. I know my viewers want to know, and I know I do. Um, did you have key mentors or influencers along this journey that you've been on?
To an extent, I don't think I had anyone kind of in my personal life so much, but I did tend to kind of grow close to a lot of my past managers. And so I've, if there are managers that I worked really well with, I've kind of stayed in contact, and would meet up every once in a while. One of my old managers is actually an investor in our startup now.
Yes.
Um, and a lot of those people I just kind of appreciate being around because I think they have interesting perspectives, new takes that I'm not thinking about. um, and really can be helpful even without knowing too much about their domain. Just the way that they think. So yes, to an extent, but maybe in a little of a different way than a lot of other people.
I think these networks we build along the way, especially people that we have relationships with, we never know what's going to happen in the future. I think it's a good thing to share with people about just the fact of keeping in touch with people. I know that's happened for me, and I hope I've been that for other people along this path of mine.
Yeah.
Um, what has been like one of the most unexpected challenges you've had in your organization?
Um, that's a good question. I think, uh, broadly speaking, all startups want growth and just more and more growth. And figuring out the best kind of growth channels for me in a certain way is maybe kind of like one of the bigger challenges that I think we faced and we kind of continue to iterate on and figure out kind of the right way to approach. Um, we have, tried the traditional channels like email marketing, just like cold outbound campaigns, ad campaigns, referrals, things like that, affiliate marketing, and kind of just working through that. I think it's opened my eyes to just how crowded of a space it is out there today and how difficult it can be to kind of differentiate your messaging in, call it 50 characters or 50 words or less, basically, that you have someone's attention for. And so that's been maybe a little bit of the kind of like the biggest surprise and things that we've had to kind of overcome is just the difficulty in making sure that our messaging and our offering is differentiated and something that people want to make these growth channels work.
Good. I'm always curious to ask people, especially in our time now as technology races forward, as it's been doing for many years, but now we're in the world of AI, which is always an interesting conversation of this push and pull people have of being scared to death of it or fully embracing it, and
Hmm.
somewhere on that spectrum. But it's interesting to me of how people balance new innovation, new technology, along with sustainability of, we'll just call it keeping the lights on. How does that work for you to balance those two things?
Um, so I think there's almost the straightforward answer, and then there's a bit of the meta answer. So, we are a new technology for a lot of people to adapt, and we are an AI tool. So, I think it obviously makes a lot of sense for us to want more people to adopt and change quickly. And, internally, the kind of other version of this, we do use a lot of the new AI tools to make sure that our productivity is as high as possible. I think we'd be a little bit hypocritical if we were kind of caught in the old ways of, using spreadsheets for everything or um, doing our own research on Google versus just getting ChatGPT to do our research for us or write our queries for us or write some of our code for us and things like that. Um, we really strive to adopt the newest technologies as quickly as possible because we think that it can be a kind of competitive edge for us in our productivity. To the extent that it's kind of part of performance a little bit to the people who kind of are working on our team to say, you need to be using these tools, they're going to improve your productivity. You need to, like, why haven't you created a new premium subscription for yourself for this? You need to do that and make sure that we're getting the most out of your work as possible. So definitely are trying to move quickly, definitely trying to embody that startup mentality. Um, but yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
Good, good. When we're on these journeys that we're on, we learn a lot of leadership principles around scaling teams. I'm interested in knowing what's one that you knew was going to be part of how were working to scale your team, and what is one that you knew I'm not doing that?
Oh, what was the one that you're not doing?
Yeah, there's one that you knew you were going to take with you that you've learned along the way to use to scale your team, and then there's that one that you
Oh.
saw in action that is sort of like, yeah, we're not doing that. What were those two things?
You know, it's funny. I've actually talked to some other Y Combinator startups and have found that our philosophy towards scaling teams can be very different than theirs. One that we kind of take on is and follow as much as possible is that we want to scale slowly and carefully instead of kind of too quickly. I think that it's probably a better problem to have where people are a bit underwater, but we have good people versus the inverse where you have maybe too many people and they're actually not kind of filled to their maximum capacity. Um, and I think in a lot of those cases, you're not hiring necessarily the best people. And what that kind of comes out as when we post job postings, generally we're willing to pay a lot more because we want to get better people, but we're going to get a lot fewer of them. And that also comes across as, we're probably not taking interns for the summer because we think that they're only going to be around for a few months. And so it's a harder kind of value prop for us, even if they're very great kind of people and very smart people. We want people who are going to be committed in the long run, who are very good at what they do, and we're willing to kind of pay for that too. Um, the other kind of, I guess, scaling principle that I've heard from other people that we are not following is really the inverse of that, where a lot of times I know companies will look for cheap resources to do kind of the mundane work on a day-to-day basis of, maybe that's just kind of growth or prospecting or sending out email campaigns or things along those lines. Um, and they get cheap resources and it's a good market for employers right now, so people are willing to work for relatively cheap. It's not something that we want because we want the better people in our company, and I think that it's also a little bit important um, for us to kind of, and especially for myself as the CEO, to be um, kind of like see all the different elements of the work that's happening and actually do a lot of those things. And so I'm very happy to, instead of having an intern build the cold outbound email campaigns that we have, do that myself and see exactly how it's working and kind of internalize a little bit of that response from the market that we see. So yeah, hopefully that's kind of a good
Yeah.
answer.
Yes, I'm have lately really been had an eye on cold email campaigns myself. I have a team that works around me, and I had to explore with them myself because three of the four that I hired all was from a cold email.
Hmm.
And I'm not a big, or I wasn't a big cold email kind of person. And I had to explore within myself what that was all about, having just formed a team from cold emails, which is now has me working with someone on cold emails. So it's kind of interesting how we have to dismantle our own structures of knowing sometime.
Yes, no,
Tell
definitely.
me what your secrets are in retaining your people. I know my viewers are going to want to know with some of the things you've shared with us so far.
Yeah, well, so we're still a pretty young company, and fortunately, we haven't had any churn quite yet at Promi. Um, Even before that at Uber, I suppose some of the kind of mm, lessons that I learned on motivating people and such. I think that comes a little bit with the leadership principles that I mentioned before. If you are doing an effective job of getting people excited about their job and the like tapping into the intellectual curiosity of people when they're coming to work, I think it's easier to retain them. And I think that, you want to have that kind of open, transparent working environment. So people are like looking forward to talking to you and as their manager and like getting your opinion on things. And it shouldn't be me, like them being afraid of, me kind of coming in and telling them they're doing things wrong. It should be them getting excited to get my opinion because I think it'll improve their project. I want that sense of ownership too. And so when that happens, I think that like you build that sense of ownership and then, that also helps a lot with churn because it's their baby too. It's not just mine. So,
Yeah, yeah. I was coaching a CEO recently, and he presented a problem that he wanted to solve, which was my people don't come see me in my office.
hmm.
And we explored that for a while. And at the end of the exploration, I said, this is really quite simple. And he looked at me like I had the big secret for him. And I said, have you ever thought about coming out of your office?
And what did he
Something
say? Did you convince him to get out of his office?
something that seems so obvious to some of us that operate that way, that this expectation that people are just going to come to you when you have a CEO title. It has more to do than you just have an open door. They're going to come visit you. This is about um, how you're interacting and how are you visiting them and making the space where people feel comfortable coming to your door. So
Yeah.
he's working on it. He's trying very hard to move about and get out with people. I think it's part personality and part just had to have that concept broken apart a little bit that everybody was just going to come to him. It was kind of fun to explore that.
Yeah, no, definitely. And a little bit in my opinion, it depends on the types of teams you built. And that also kind of comes with like seniority level. You know, for us right now, we basically have two co-founders and then a relatively junior team beyond that. We just want people that are smart, that, as I mentioned before, are intellectually curious, and then we think that we can kind of teach them the things that we want them to know. So they have a lot less kind of domain expertise or things like that. And they don't necessarily have like very set in stone kind of ways of working. Um, and so I kind of find too that with those junior teams, you can kind of teach them and mold them a little bit more than like the senior teams or the senior people who might come in and want to, have more formality around, oh, we bring this up in a meeting and we like don't swing by people's offices and like kind of chat with them then.
Yeah,
Um, so yeah, just something to add.
yes, it is. Tell me, where do you see Promi in 5 years?
A unicorn, obviously, right?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so we continue to scale. I think that where we are right now is we have a lot of conviction that our product works. It's just we need to build out the kind of scalability around it to make it more approachable for merchants to kind of use for themselves. Um, Even my work at Uber, we saw huge gains in just by personalizing a lot of these like discounts that we're giving out to the extent of, 30 to 40% improvement in the revenue that you're actually generating. And I think we've actually seen very similar things, like magnitude of the benefits we're able to generate for merchants with Promi. And so that I think seeing that magnitude gives the entire team a lot of conviction with moving forward and trying to scale as much as possible. And so it also gives me conviction on this idea that like, things are going to be more and more personalized down the road with e-commerce. And so I think in 5 years, if we're doing it right, Promi is a core piece of pretty much every e-commerce merchant's tech stack. And we're able to really generate a lot more revenue for them by leveraging AI to better kind of take advantage of the different channels that merchants or visitors are coming through and kind of the history of that visitor's views and purchases on the site and things. Um, and I think, that also kind of comes with just like a little bit of a mentality shift on, you know, today, a lot of merchants just kind of have static websites. And I think in tomorrow, probably will be a big part of like really dynamic, personalized websites for everyone who kind of comes in.
What's the next big opportunity you're focusing on?
Oof. So, I mean, it depends on, I guess, the timeline here, we're obviously focused a lot on capitalizing on this like personalization model that we have right now and making it more available to merchants. And uh, as I was mentioning before, with just like building out more scalability features. So I think that's a huge opportunity. I think that's like a ton of just revenue increase that we can generate for merchants. Beyond that, the broader pricing landscape, I think that a lot of merchants really just don't have a lot of know-how into how to price their products today. And so beyond personalization, even just setting the base price of products, there's a ton that we can do there. And so I think that that's probably like as we look down the horizon a bit, that's kind of where I would see maybe some of the product evolving towards over time.
Great, great. How do you stay inspired and motivated as a leader? How does Peter keep himself motivated?
Yeah, um well, I think it's helpful to live a very sustainable lifestyle too. So, I'm still going to the gym and things and um I think a lot of times the dismay that leaders have or people who are starting like entrepreneurs who are starting startups is focusing on things that are kind of like very small or things that didn't work well today. And for myself, because we have such good experiment results and we're seeing that like the model's working, I just need to zoom out a little bit. And, if today did not go well, I think of, well, let me take a step back. We still know that our product works. We still know that we have plenty of runway to scale it up in over the next few years. We still know that a lot of merchants want this because we're still getting more customers. And so the kind of broad strokes and the big building blocks are there. It's just we need to kind of fill it in and put them together and actually build everything. And so that's kind of what gives me motivation to continue going.
Yeah, yeah. I think often we look back and wring our hands and I don't know. For me personally, it's more about did I learn anything? Do I need to know anything? And then get right back here now, looking forward. That's where I think the magic happens. If you were going to give a piece of advice to future founders or some future entrepreneur getting ready to jump into this world, what would it be?
I think that probably it's going to be more difficult than you think, but it's also going to be very rewarding. And being an entrepreneur, in my mind, a lot of times means being willing to stick through and continue working on what you're working on through a lot of pitfalls. And you just need to be ready for that and know that that's how these things work. And it's just going to happen. One of the big advantages I think of going through programs like Y Combinator is you have this peer group of startups, and anytime you have customer churn or just no response to this big kind of like email campaign that you sent out or some posts that you had or things like that, and uh, it's helpful to kind of go through and talk to other startups and realize that happens to everyone. This is not
Yes.
just you. Like that's just a part of building and you just have to keep building. And
Yeah,
so that's, I think, the biggest like eye-opening thing to me for this whole experience is just it's going to be tough and you just have to keep building and
yeah.
eventually you'll get there.
It's great to have our networks to put things in perspective sometimes.
Yes. Yeah.
And remember, we're not the only one out there that are, have a little stubbed our toe or walked into a wall today.
Right.
Um,
Right.
Peter, please give us a few sentences about Promi that you would like my viewers to know.
Sure. So Chromie in the simplest terms, is a platform for e-commerce merchants to personalize their discounts and pricing across their sites. Um, we leverage a machine learning model to predict how price sensitive different visitors are, and we will adjust the discounts and prices in real time for any of those visitors in order to kind of maximize revenue while also improving bottom line metrics for the merchants.
Great. Peter Moot of Promi, CEO of Promi, I want to thank you for being with me today on Opening Pathways.
Of course, it was fun.
And to my viewers, thank you for joining again, and I'll see you on Opening Pathways next time.